Next up, let's talk more about state, specifically where we put it and how we know where to put it. This is something that I've said a lot of things are the trickiest part of React, and all of them have to do with designing your application, figuring out what's a component, what gets to be props, what needs to be state, where that state goes. But within all of that, probably the trickiest thing to wrap your head around early on is where state goes and which component manages state, which component has its own state, what gets props that is state somewhere else that's passed down versus what has its own state. It just takes time, but there are a couple of principles that we'll talk about. So as a little demonstration, let's try building a dice. I don't want to call it a game, even though the slides say it's a game. It's not. It's just a dice roller where we have some number of dice showing up and a button to roll. And when I click roll, we could add a fancy animation or something, but all that happens is that we get new numbers here. And we can control how many dice should display and what the range of values is. So here we have each die going from 1 to 20, but we could also have a more standard die going from 1 to 6. So it should work like this. If I render just the dice component, I should see this by default. 6 dice, each number goes from 1 to 20. But it would be nice if I could also reuse this component and pass in different props. The number of dice will default to 6, but I could also say, actually, I want 4, and I want the maximum value to be 20, which is actually the default, but I could say maximum value is 10 or 6, and control how many dice we actually have and what the range of numbers is for each die. Also, I can pass in a title. The default will just say main game, or I could pass in mini dice, whatever, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons dice, that sort of thing. So in thinking about how we would structure this, we know that at the very least, we're going to have a dice component, and there's probably going to be a loop in there, or a map or something to make each die. Each die could be just some JSX elements inside of the dice component, but given what we've been talking about, it makes sense to make a standalone die component, a single die. So dice will render multiple dies, but we still haven't addressed state. But let's just start by making a die component, a simple die. Okay. So I have a new create React app. It's empty, just getting the default here. Let's empty it out, or maybe I'll leave this class name app just so I can get my nice little styles in there. It will center everything instead of having it be on the left-hand side. Anyway, we're not going to have an H1. So I know that I'm going to have two components. I want to render a dice component here, and that should then result in what I see, at least this top one. Dice should give me that with no props. And then in there, I'm probably going to render a die or multiple die components. Of course, dice doesn't exist. So let's make that dice.js. We'll import React from React and then define our component dice, some props. At the bottom, export default dice. Now looking at these props, we know we want num dice, title, and max val, and we'll give them defaults. So I'm probably just going to destructure those. Num dice, title, and max val. And we can give them a default. So the default for num dice will be 6. Title will default to main game. Is that what we did? Yes. And max val can default to 20. All right. So then in here, ignoring state to start, if I just want to hard code something, we're going to need to loop num dice times. So we need something to happen 6 times if we're using the default. And for each time, we want to make probably a div that has a piece of text in it to represent the actual die, that number. And we'll want to generate a random number between 1 and max val. All right, so we could begin with a return. Probably return a div or a fragment to contain all of the dice. And then for however many dice we have for num dice, we'll want to loop and make some sort of, probably just a div to start. So I'm going to do that up top. We don't have an array that we can map over, at least not yet. So I'm going to do kind of a janky thing. I'm going to go with dice equals, and then actually, how do I want to do this? Maybe I'll start with a loop. So for let I equals 0. It's kind of rare to use a for loop in React, but we'll start with this. I equals 0. I is less than, and then num dice, I plus plus, and then I'm going to make an array. What should I call this? I guess just dice lowercase will be an empty array. And then I'm going to push into dice a new number that I generate 6 times. So some random number. And to generate that random number, I guess I could make a function eventually, but let's just go with const num equals math.random. And then I'm going to multiply it by the max val. And then floor that so we can get a integer. And I don't want 0 as a number, so I'm going to add 1. So now I'm going from 1 to 20. Okay. Then I'm going to push num in, and that should give us an array of numbers. So then over here, I can map each number, something like dice.map. For each num, we'll render a div, and inside that div, we'll display num. Okay, so we have that set up now. Let's see if I render this dice component and I successfully import it. Import dice from ./dice. We render a single one. There we go. We're getting our numbers. All right. And every time I refresh, I'm getting new numbers. And I should be able to pass in a num dice prop, set that to 9, and we get 9 dice. I pass in 4, and max val could be, how about 6? I want regular dice from 1 to 6. There we go. 2, 2, 4, 3, 2, 5, 4, 2. It's working. But the big issue we have now is that I can't click a button to randomize the dice. That's the whole goal here. They're hideous. They're not displaying in a way that really makes sense. But I don't have a way of actually achieving that functionality. With what I'm doing here, how would I even make that work? The only way I'm getting new numbers right now is by reloading the entire page and generating that code. But we don't have a way of just saying re-render this component, re-render with new numbers, unless we use state. So we're going to need to use state, and we'll store the numbers in state, and then we can actually update state. When you click that button, we'll generate new random numbers. Okay, so let's try it. Let's import useState from React. So we'll call useState, we'll destructure it. Let's go with the name numbers and set numbers equals useState, and we'll initialize it as an empty array. And then we have to figure out what we initialize it to. And actually what I'm thinking is that it would be better if the very first time the component renders, if we don't have numbers showing up, and we have to click roll to get our dice to actually roll. So we don't just want random numbers showing up at the beginning, we want to wait for you to click roll. So we can start with an empty array, but actually let's make an array that is the length of num dice. So the same number of spaces in that array. And there's a method we can use for that, array.from, and then we can pass in length. We want to make an array.from based off of length num dice. So this will just make us an array that has empty spaces, empty slots, num dice times, so 6 empty slots if we don't pass in that prop. All right, so we have that piece of state. Next up, we need to use it somewhere. So I'm going to comment this out for a moment. And down here, we can now call numbers.map. And for each number, we will make a div with that number inside of it. If we look at what we're getting here, if we replace num with something else, they're still being rendered here. They just don't have a number to display. Now what I can do is add in a button. So I'll make a button down here. We'll call this roll. And when you click that button, we want to generate new numbers and put them in the state. Set numbers using that array. So let's add an on click, and we'll call a function called roll or roll dice. It doesn't exist yet. We'll define it, const roll dice. We don't need any arguments here, but what we're going to do is map over numbers. So we could do this here. We could make a new array every time, an empty array, loop over a certain number of times, num dice times, pick a new number, push it in, then return dice. Or we can use the more React-y way where we use pure functions, the built-in JS array methods like map. And that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm actually just going to use an implicit return. So we're going to call set numbers for numbers in there. That's our callback argument. Numbers, we are going to return numbers.map for each n. It doesn't really matter. We're not using the current number in there. We're going to call this code right here. Math.floor, math.random times maxval plus 1. So generate a new number for every number that's currently in there. Make a new array, since we're using map. That will be automatically returned from here. That should give us a bunch of new numbers that have been randomly added into that numbers array. Now let's see what happens. Here's our roll button. I click it, and it is indeed working. Okay, so not too bad. But at the moment, everything's done in one component. And it would be nicer to split things up into two components, which is what we'll do in the next video.